the EU institutions never had the competence to do what they are doing. Because, for instance, insisting on this rule of law report, creating new and new mechanisms to control, to intervene, to question things, they never had the competence. So on this basis, member states can just do the same things.
I'm here in the studio with Bernadett Petri. She is the Hungarian Ministerial Commissioner for directly managed EU funds. She's originally a lawyer. She has over 10 years experience in Brussels, working both for the European Parliament and the Commission. She's a university lecturer, she's a researcher, and she's also the managing director of the Hungarian Development Promotion Office. This is an impressive resume. Welcome, Commissioner.
Thank you very much.
Let's start with the most obvious topic, which is, of course, the question of the Hungarian frozen funds. This whole story has been dragging on for so long that many of our readers, viewers, have it hard to just follow everything. So let's just go back to the start and just go over what happened to be able to explain where we stand now. So briefly, for the sake of simplicity, there was 30 billion EU funds that have been frozen for Hungary in December 2022. What kind of funds are these, and what led to this decision from the European Commission?
Mm-hmm. I used to start all the conversation about the explanation of the EU budget, because there's just so many rumors about what kind of money has been suspended and what are the directly managed EU funds, what is cohesion policy. So I would just start for this summary. Let's just talk briefly about the structure of the European Union budget. So the European Union budget has two main parts. One part is the so-called cohesion policy, which is a big chunk. And this money of the cohesion policy used to be distributed to countries where the cohesion should be enhanced, where a cohesive economy should be built up. These are not all the countries, some of the countries, some of the regions. So this is limited, meaning that the amount that is deriving from cohesion policy and goes to Hungary, it similarly goes to most of the CE countries. But it is not going to all part of Belgium, for instance. And it is not going to all part of Spain, for instance. So member states this is diversified, whether member state gets money from this fund or not. The Western countries, I would say there's a distinction of EU 13, EU 14, meaning when joining the EU, the cohesion policy came in first during the southern enlargement. And that was the moment where the European Union decided that a dedicated budget should be spent to countries, the economy of which should be developed to achieve the EU standard. This is the chunk of money where this suspension came in, because there's this so-called conditionality regulation that has been set around 2019, 2020. I was still at the Commission when they started working about it, and we were just very hardly insisting that it shouldn't happen. But it happened, as we can all see. And at the end of the day, they came up with this regulation, and obviously it was targeted on Hungary and Poland. And the activation of the mechanism was also targeted to these two countries. And we ended up having this situation, the suspension, although, going back to the first thought, the other part of the EU money, the so-called EU programs money, was never concerned by this suspension, with one exception, that is Erasmus, Horizon, and the case of those institutions as universities which were the so-called model-changing universities. And there was one clear instruction on behalf of the Commission that they decided to suspend even the directly managed EU funds. Now, maybe this is time now to compare how this money is spent in order to be this understandable for our audience. So cohesion policy money goes through the member state all the time. So it is the member state that creates the so-called partnership agreement with the Commission. And on the basis of this partnership agreement, the money is spent by the member state. The directly managed EU funds never go through the member state. This is money, the decision on which is taken by the European Commission and its executive agencies, meaning that all actors, all role players in the countries should be in this competition for the money together. They should show a European level of competitiveness, and this is very hard. So whilst in the case of cohesion money, it is basically the member state that decides about the priorities. These are obviously agreed on with the European Commission institutions. But in the case of EU programs such as Horizon, Single Market Program, European Defence Fund, Space Program, Erasmus, Creative Europe, and so on, the decision on priorities is always taken by the institutions.
By the institutions, yes.
Yes.
While we're on the topic of cohesion policy, there was a very interesting debate yesterday in the plenary. Some of the leftist MEPs accused Prime Minister Orbán of staying in the EU only to keep on profiting from cohesion funds or certain direct EU funds. And he countered by saying that no, 80% actually flows right back to the Western member states. So it's more like a form of investment.
Yeah, well, the debate was quite spicy, I would say. And before answering the question, I would like to sum up, because I was there. I really experienced the atmosphere of the debate. I think that during the discussion, the main problem was that it is really time to discuss certain things about the EU economy, because we can see the regression. We can also see that the Hungarian competitiveness program is a must in order to bring a change in Europe. And this discussion didn't happen, because instead of reflecting on the problems and points raised by Prime Minister Orbán, the entire debate just became like this old-fashioned Hungarian rule of law discussions in the EP, which are getting more and more boring. Maybe now the leftist party just used the publicity of the EU presidency of Hungary to create another rule of law debate, whilst the normal rule of law discussions are not followed by anyone anymore in the EP. Well, that was sad, because I think that it should have been Ursula von der Leyen, president of the Commission, who had this obligation to react on what future she would like to imagine to Europe. And instead of doing so, she was just insisting on this usual political problems, and always mentioning those points that are the core elements of the Hungarian internal politics. And she was not behaving as a commissioner president, which was really and truly a problem.
Not as the guardian of the treaties, right?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to get back to the Hungarian rule of law question, also because of the frozen funds. But you touched upon the Hungarian competitiveness plan, or I know there's also a competitiveness pact that Hungary is preparing for next month's European Community Summit. But I'm just interested, what is the Hungarian competitiveness idea? Because I have to admit that I was a bit surprised to hear so much praise from Prime Minister Orbán for the Draghi report. Because, most of us across the political aisle can agree that the diagnosis is correct. there's overregulation, and there's absolutely, Europe is lagging behind the US and China. But Draghi's solutions, more EU, more integration, more accelerated green transformation, and like becoming a permanent debt union is not something that I would imagine Hungary would support. So is there a Hungarian alternative to taking a joint debt, joint loans again and again?
I think that the competitiveness concept of the Hungarian presidency takes all the elements of the Draghi report which describe the actual situation, but suggests a different solution, slightly different solution, because some of the elements of the Hungarian suggestions are very similar to the one of Draghi, although there is one important element that is different, that the Draghi used to insist on that a lot of EU money should be spent on competitiveness, meaning that we need 100 billion euro to bring a change and to shift European competitiveness into the right path. Although the Hungarian plan is a bit cheaper because it has a different mindset. I tell you why. As we can see in the Draghi report, there are certain elements describing, for instance, the way how innovation is flowing among the member states. It is very much insisting on there are innovation gaps, and these innovation gaps are creating consequences, obviously, for the European market, because the principle of the single market is that it should be unique, it should be equal. And instead of just approaching this from an investment perspective, the Hungarian approach is rather insisting on the importance how the EU should treat the member states differently. I tell you an example from my practice. Since we are dealing a lot with Horizon program, we have this analysis how countries are performing from drawing the money from the program itself. And I would also reflect back to to your point on the yesterday's debate. There was a Dutch MEP who said that Hungary is really just in the EU to get the money from other member states. I find it very nasty because just saying Horizon, those countries who cannot draw too much money from these funds are basically financing other countries' innovation. So, for instance, let's just take Poland. Poland is a big country. Paying into Horizon per capita is a lot of money, although at the end they can only draw less than 1% of the Horizon funds. So the 99% goes to other countries. So we can see that maybe from cohesion policy, other countries, Western countries paying into the budget are really financing the cohesion principle, getting into practice in member states. Whilst in the case of EU programs, the situation is very different because those countries are often investing into the innovation of other member states. But this is normal because single market used to operate like this, that one pays in, the other gets the money, the other pays in, and the one gets the money. But this is a normal system. What is the new perspective from the Hungarian competitiveness approach is that we should work on to somehow equalize these gaps of innovation, and the EU should never act against the budget of its member states and never should act against the economy of its member state, because if acting against somehow the economy of one of the member states, it will have an effect of the entire EU because the single market is operating like this. Then the second principle that costs no money, it is just a different perspective, is that when talking about defense, it is not just acting for defense, but we should invest into defense. And when investing into defense, it is the question of member states are spending how much money on it. Hungary is spending almost 3% of the GDP on defense investment, especially defense innovation. And this is also an approach we are suggesting for competitiveness, that all member states should do so, because when talking about security or even the so-called strategic autonomy of the EU, it is also the question of innovation, also the question of investment.
Do I understand it correctly that Hungary supports, for one, a deeper market union, so a deeper integration in terms of economy and the common market, and also some kind of integration in terms of defense, at least on the investment level?
Yes, a lot.
So is there a risk of deeper economic integration leading to more political integration that can be counterproductive for the sovereignty of member states?
Definitely, yes. And this brings us to the question of how the EU competences should be set in order to make this happen, or in order to make the entire competitiveness plan happen. Here, the most crucial point is that in the treaties it is set that the EU should act where it is more efficient if the EU acts. We used to forget about this principle.
Subsidiarity.
Yes, but the subsidiarity analysis within the institutions are very technical. So they're just used to scrutinize how the lawmaking can affect the principle of subsidiarity. Instead of this, we should just go back to the subject. Is it necessarily for the EU to act, for instance, in the field of education that much? We just don't know. It should be scrutinized. Does it have an added value if the EU acts on culture? In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. But the leading principle should be somehow that if the EU acts against the interest of its member state, and it shouldn't be ever fulfilling the subsidiarity principle, because we are together in the Union. And as I said, if there is any kind of instruction that is diminishing the competitiveness of one of the member states, then it will diminish the competitiveness of the entire Union. This principle should have been applied when talking about the suspension of EU funds towards Hungary.
In theory, it sounds good. The problem is that we have a commission which has entirely different goals, long-term goals in mind. I mean, it's no surprise that the Draghi report ties together these two things, deeper economic integration and deeper political integration. They say that the only way we can correctly spend that 800 billion, if we can even raise it, if we give way more power to the Commission to decide. So that's a one thing for member states to just think about, how to how to circumvent or how to prohibit the Commission from hijacking this process and turning it to yet another power grab, because that's what the Commission is best in.
Yeah,
taking crises and turning them into power grabs.
If we take a look at how the EU institutions were operating in the last, I would say, 10 years, then we would get the impression that it was just all about power, because everything the institution did, it always had some kind of effect on power, but even against each other. They went to the court, they sued themselves, they were just fighting on comitology, just one technical aspect. So there's always something going on among the three institutions. And plus there is the EU court, the role of which is just a bit unclear, because it should act on an objective basis, although it has the basic documents saying that it should act for the EU integration. So when there is already like a path that is dedicated for this court, then it is not going to act on an objective way. So a problem that should be raised a bit more. The Commission obviously is the queen of the institutions, because it has the right to initiate a law. And here the question for me in the Draghi report was that why would we enhance the lawmaking process? Why would we make it more effective by giving more power for initiation? Although maybe more power should be introduced at the level of the member states, where the real action takes place. Because the legacy of the member state, the democracy legitimacy of them, is the most powerful within the entire EU. And that's why, for instance, the suggestion of Prime Minister Orbán about the Schengen summit was a very special one, because he says that in the case of the economic crisis, where the EU really has lost path on a lot of things. We have seen what happened to Greece. We have seen how unfair the treatment of Greece has been by the EU. There is the Varoufakis book that tells a lot about it. Over there, we have experienced that the solution has been done by the member state. So member state did the dirty job, and not the Commission. Commission was about just communication, sometimes even making the crisis deeper. And that's why, since there is now the Schengen crisis that also has an economic impact, the solution shouldn't be brought by the Commission, because it never happens. It is just lawmaking. It is just making initiatives without democratic control. The solution should be brought by member states, creating among themselves an internal circle to discuss the real problems and finding a solution that really fits to the priorities of the national law of them. Because this is something that the European Commission often overlooks.
Yes. I mean, Schengen is not the EU. The EU is not Schengen. These things should be separated.
Yeah.
We have non-EU member states.
It's not a question of lawmaking. It is the question of agreement among the member states.
I'm really looking forward to see if that summit can ever happen. It certainly was one of the most interesting ideas laid out yesterday. But while we're at Schengen, there's also the money aspect to it, because Hungary is also being fined by the European Court of Justice, 200 million euros fine plus 1 million per day, which so far has accumulated to over 100 million. And the Commission seems to be determined to make Hungary pay this fine at any cost. So I just want to ask, what's really happening? As far as I understand, Hungary got the fine because it requires asylum seekers to register their claims while still outside the country.
Yeah, that's the hotspot system.
That's the hotspots. But the Commission, the court said that this was violating EU norms. Yeah. And for 3 months, Hungary said that this is the Hungarian law. This is what the Hungarian voters gave a mandate for the government. We're not going to change it. 2 weeks ago, they said, okay, we're maybe open to changing it, but we're not going to pay for it. So
what's going on, right?
Yeah, where do we stand now?
Yeah, the entire subject of migration is just like this. And I think that the biggest default on behalf of the EU institution was when they forced through this new migration pact. That was a big mistake. It happened just before election, and the aim was that, okay, so let's just put this through so that the conservative guys cannot block the process, because they have already foreseen the result of the election. That was foreseeable. And now we ended up having this really useless migration pact. I'm telling useless because already those countries, which were very much supporters of it, are like insisting. Let's just take a look at what's going on in Germany. So Mr. Scholz experienced the willingness of the people to bring a change in migration, because he just took a look what was the result of the recent elections, and obviously he already started to reopen the negotiation and told to the EU institutions that maybe we should see whether, for instance, the retention and maybe the Dublin system should be rediscussed. And this is a powerful example, because Germany was a big supporter of the migration pact.
Perhaps best example, but Germany is not alone, because there's also Sweden, the Netherlands, Denmark.
And they already opted out. So this really shows when a member state doesn't want happen what the EU institutions are forcing on them. So this is really the question of subsidiarity. And here, I think that at the end of the day, solutions can only be found if the migration approach would be rethought from a new perspective, that where is the point where is EU intervention is still needed, and what should be the competence of the member state. Because, for instance, border protection, that is a national issue. Although it has an effect on the entire union, that means that the member state should act, but the EU should pay. This is a normal principle. This is how it used to happen in other cases. But we cannot see it in the case of Hungary, because we are financing border control, but no money is coming. Instead, they are just trying to fine us and get more money paid for migration.
That's also what the CDU said last week. I mean, in Germany, the leader of the CDU, they said that the EU should have this, demanded actually, that the EU had this responsibility to finance the external border protection, inclusive the hard border infrastructure, border fences, walls, in the frontline states. He was, of course, talking about, he singled out Poland and Greece. He didn't talk about Hungary because that's a different issue, but Hungary has spent over 2 billion since 2015 on that fence and protecting it. So there's a very obvious double standard in this, in the middle of this. Just help me understand, why is that Poland can be proud of having a border wall and not letting anyone through? Greece the same. Why is that CDU and Western Europeans, Germany, can call for EU funds to be financing these border walls, but Hungary at the same time punished for it?
Yeah, this shows really double or triple standards, no? Especially because the migration question has been deeply politicized, which is another problem. So the first issue is that the EU doesn't want to prevent migration. We cannot really see any kind of... There are certain EU interventions to prevent migration, but they are not powerful. The member states would like to have more. The Commission is not so interested, because for a Commission, this is a power question. More migration, more power. This is just so simple. Then, that is the first thing. That's nothing for prevention, or very weak interventions for prevention. The second is that they try to do a lot for management, migration management, which is a late phase of the migration process. So when you are managing migration, the asylum seeker, the migrant, is already there. Then you are forced to find solutions, and the set of solutions are a bit limited. And consequently, that's the point where member states' interest comes in, because they want to treat differently the asylum seekers, taking into consideration their national priorities, their geopolitics, the composition of the society, plenty other things that are internal things. And now, at this moment, the European Commission is coming with this lawmaking system and forcing the member state to follow like this one-size-fits-all approach. And the member states just simply cannot, because they have to tell the people what is going to happen. But here in the Commission, this is quite far away from, I don't know, a village of Slovakia, where a mayor should explain what's going on migration. And this brings us to the very problem that the migration should be treated where it happens. It should be handled at the level where it should be explained to the citizens, and that is the national level. So here, if no new mindset would come in, then we would just fall into the same trap every year. Since 2015, we are doing the same things here in the EU. It is so sad. We are just repeating the same problems, and there is simply a new way directed towards migration. And since we are doing the same faults, obviously the same thing happens. That the Commission comes up with an idea and the member states don't want to follow it. They opt out. I'm very much in doubt whether the new Commission would find a solution for this, because beforehand a decision should be taken about competences. As you remember, in 2022, there was this January or February Council decision, the Council conclusions, where it has been very clearly said that any solution found on migration should be acceptable for all member states. It is very similar to the consensus procedure. It is not a consensus procedure, but member states still agreed among themselves that they don't want to follow the normal majority rules in case of migration because it is too delicate.
Well, but I mean, at the same time, yes, we see that the Commission doesn't want to backtrack on anything regarding this new migration pact. But we see that there is a greater and greater push in the Council to have something, not necessarily to replace it, but to have something to complement it. Before the elections, there was a joint push of over almost 2/3 of the member states actually to have something, a framework, something similar to what Italy has done in Albania. In Albania, they have these facilities that are supposed to be open next month or in December, maybe. So basically externalizing the entire asylum procedure outside of EU borders, which would eliminate the problem of people just disappearing into the Schengen area, eliminate the problem that we have below 20% deportation rates, which is just abysmal at this rate, and this is the best we've been doing since the beginning of the migration crisis. So if the majority of the member states want something like this, they want basically the same as Hungary has been doing, not letting in people before their procedures have ended, before they've been granted asylum.
Why is the EU not taking this? Yeah, the question is very obvious.
Member states are the member states really so helpless as to not put this into law?
Yeah. This is the very question where there is at least apparently an agreement among the member states. Then why is the EU institutions, why are they not just taking this into consideration? Yeah, I think that about migration, we all know how soft lawmakers, and I'm just trying to wrap this very well, are influencing the EU institutions towards solutions that are not necessarily matching the interest of the member state.
Stakeholders,
so-called stakeholders. Yeah, and this is a very powerful procedure because there's a lot of money in it. So, I mean, we should face it that this is a finance process, and obviously, if these stakeholders are forcing the Commission to find a solution that is against the will of the people, against the will of the member states, then something wrong is going on. And maybe with the new composition of the EP, this could be discussed, and potentially the EP's part, the conservative part of the parliament, could somehow highlight this problem, because highlighting the problem can maybe bring a change. Taking into consideration the composition of the EP, there won't be enough to bring immediately a change, but they can initiate at least a process. And what national elections can also determine is that people are apparently showing what they want. People are showing what kind of migration they would like to see. They want security. They want stability. And they are forcing somehow the lawmakers to make this happen at the national level and the EU as well.
So shifting the council as well, either by voting in more conservative parties into government, or by basically scaring establishment parties like in Germany into adopting more conservative talking points.
Yeah, precisely. And I think that in this process, maybe the advising bodies can have a role as well. Committee of Regions, local lawmakers are sitting there, local policymakers, mayors, people who are close to the citizens. And they used to see a bit better the situation because they are more realistic. Why are they realistic? Because they have to take the responsibility. They have to act on the basis of responsibility because they're close to the citizens.
Well, Parliament's supposed to be also representing the citizens in Brussels, but that's completely different. I mean, we have the third largest party, and you said hopefully with a more conservative parliament we could start initiating more conservative policies, but we have the third largest group with over 80 million votes, and they've been excluded from all positions of responsibility.
This is how democracy works in the EU institutions. That cordon sanitaire, it was really, this is really and truly the worst thing that happened to democracy, I think, in the last 10, 15 years. Because it goes against the willingness of the people. So citizens are voting for an MEP to be their representative in the EP, okay? They are just putting their confidence into this person to get a role where this person can make a difference. And then there is an EU institution coming in and saying that, okay, guys, but these political views are just not conform to what we want. So you cannot get the role. This is not normal. So this is where the question of rule of law comes in, by the way, because very often, and this is just one hard example, but the EU institutions are acting against the rule of law. So as much as they are controlling and as much as they are monitoring the member states for the rule of law, member states should monitor as much the EU institutions, whether they act against the rule of law, the principle of democracy. Because Article 2 is not just on the member states, it is on the entire EU, on the EU institutions as well. There's no exception.
Well, member states don't necessarily have this power now, but the one who should be having this power is the European Court of Justice. But, I mean, the Patriots, they sued the parliament for the Court of Sanitaire.
Yeah.
I'm going to be really interested to see that ruling from the Court of Justice. But I very rarely see that court going against the Commission's interests or von der Leyen's interests. So that's a problem. The other person who could have or should have some kind of control is the European Ombudsman.
Yeah, the European Ombudsman. But, there is this revolving doors phenomenon that those sitting at the DG are continuing at the European Court 2 years later. So very obviously, there's just the same people in different roles. So they would not be interested to bring a change. But whether or not the EU member states could have the competence to control the EU institutions from the perspective of the rule of law, I would just have one comment that the EU institutions never had the competence to do what they are doing. Because, for instance, insisting on this rule of law report, creating new mechanisms to control, to intervene, to question things, they never had the competence. So on this basis, member states can just do the same things because one case has been already presented. Then why wouldn't the reverse be able to happen? It is just a question of willingness. And I think that as much we have seen about Qatargate and all the corruption cases of the European Parliament, interest is growing among the member states to do so. Because at one point they should control what's going on in the institutions.
Well, definitely. Well, I'm looking forward. If the Council will ever publish or start publishing yearly rule of law reports on Pfizergate and similars, then
yeah, that would be excellent.
I would love that. We've gone quite a circle, so just at the end, let's go back a bit to the frozen funds, because in December last year, almost one third of the entire funds, about 10 billion, was released upon the completion of certain legal reforms to the Hungarian legal system. But there's about 20 billion cohesion and pandemic relief funds are still frozen. So what are the conditions for that to be released?
There are political conditions, I guess. Just to be clear, that in Hungary currently, in the Hungarian economy, this money is currently not missing. This is an important thing because, first of all, previous partnership agreement money is still flowing in. So far, even that money has not been spent. So for us, the question of how much money can be drawn from this fund, it is not so timely because there is no pressure. We have seen during the recent discussions that criteria to get this suspended money are set on a political basis where solution has so far not been found, but this was not the fault of Hungary. Very often new conditions came in, and the way how the Commission negotiated during this process showed very well that they were just simply not so interested to find a solution. This can remain like this for the time being, because, as I said, money is not missing from the Hungarian economy. It is stable. Whether or not this can be solved with the new Commission, this will be the question of the future. But from a member state's perspective, who is constantly under attack, who is constantly under rule of law examination, who is constantly suffering because of the EU institutions' intervention into its real sovereignty, maybe it would be crucial to bring some change during this process of rethinking the future of the EU. And now I'm referring to the EU reform, because EU reform will come. With the composition of the EP, politically a lot of things have been changed. In this reform, Hungary has clear perspectives, what we would like to see. We would like to see an EU that is more efficient, a better EU, and not more EU, because better EU is also key to competitiveness. And to achieve this better EU, we should do a lot. We should rethink the functioning of the European Union. And this is the moment where, for instance, new agreement could come in among the member states. This is also why potentially, I'm just thinking this, I'm not sure, this is why potentially Prime Minister Orbán Viktor is thinking about to create groups of member states to decide on things. Because member states can, for instance, create a new Charter of Nations to set new criteria. Where is the level of sovereignty that they would like to immanently protect? They can also decide on doing more to create more rule of law within the institutions. And this can somehow rebalance what has been done during the last 10 years, because currently the institutions are here and the member states are there. This is not equal. It would be only equal if the member state could achieve the same level. And launching a rule of law procedure means that the EU is acting like a father that is punishing the child. This is not a good approach. The right approach would be if the scrutiny would be equal. If the EU is acting like this, the member state should control them as well.
Well, to be fair, in 2020, December 2020, when they were having the budget talks, Poland and Hungary were the only ones at the end who were still vetoing the conditionality mechanism, but they were eventually pressured into dropping those vetoes, and they also agreed to it. So how could we expect any coming treaty change, EU reforms, to rectify this problem of the conditionality mechanism and the rule of law and general competence?
I think that by rethinking the competences, but this should come from the people. So by national elections, and people are more and more interested in EU politics. I think that the integration, the question of how the EU is acting, is very much in the daily conversation in member states nowadays, because there are certain reasons why this is happening, but this is a good thing because for people, most of the people, especially in Hungary, we are EU experts already because we have just went through this process of some EU person is coming to Hungary and monitoring things what we are doing back home. So this started like a conversation about the EU and functionality of the EU. And the more the EU is mismanaging things, migration, for instance, the more people would like to bring a change. And at one point, for instance, national parliaments, this could be induced into the EU process. There is this yellow card process where initiatives can be blocked. There is the so-called group of national parliaments within the EP coming up with different positions. So I see that the role of national parliaments can be very, very important in the future. And just a side note that the EU, I think, especially the EP, has already realized this, that with the new composition of the parliament, this can be crucial because there was a rules of procedure reform in the spring, just before the elections took place, and the EP rapporteur and some members tried to diminish the competence of the national parliament as much as they just would have been able. At the end of the day, just part of the text has been voted, but there was the clear intention on behalf of the earlier former composition of the EP to stop this procedure, and they want to turn back the scrutiny. They said that the EP should scrutinize the national parliaments and not the national parliaments, the EP. It didn't happen, luckily, so the national parliaments still have the competence to intervene, and I think that they should use this to bring a change.
One last thing. You very often hear the phrase ideological blackmail from Hungarian government officials when they are talking about withheld funds from the EU. And I mean, the case is very clear, especially if you think about what happened in Poland. Poland had over 100 billion frozen funds, and basically Prime Minister Tusk, who is now governing a country, said that vote for me, and I'm going to bring in the cash. And that's what happened. So, in a sense, the Commission has this power of initiating government changes or regime changes.
It doesn't have this power, but it is.
I mean, it is acting like it and exercising this power, even though it shouldn't have, which is a form of extortion. You either subscribe to our beliefs, or we force your voters to vote you out. Is Hungary in danger of this?
I don't think so. There are several reasons why I don't think so. By the way, obviously, the Commission is trying this, and all the time trying, and not just the Commission, but I think that the EP also tried to often create an atmosphere where it just try to transmit the information towards the citizens that do this, vote this, and then you get the money, so you will be fine. This is extremely dangerous, I agree. Although Hungarian people are much smarter than this, I guess. And the EU's intervention into national affairs, I think that this is not something people would sympathize with, especially because in case of Poland, they even started national campaigns to raise awareness how the PO party could retransform the EU relations towards Poland and Polish relation towards the EU, but it was unsuccessful. The reason of the current government is settled in Poland is not because of this. It was because potentially the PiS party didn't explain clearly enough what it is doing for its people in Poland. And I think that comparing Hungary to Poland, the Hungarian government is launching national consultation, is communicating a lot, is trying to enlighten the processes of the EU, so that the Hungarian people can't be just misled by the EU institutions. And this is why I'm saying that we are much better informed, much smarter. So I truly believe that potentially Commission, Parliament will try everything to do this. But I believe that the people just won't let this happen.
Well, I hope so. I mean, so far we saw the results at the EU elections too. But yeah, thank you for finishing on this positive note, and thank you for coming to the studio and talk to us. See you next time.